It was always the emotional one in my family, the girl who felt everything too deeply and said sorry too quickly. I believed kindness was strength, and love could heal any wound if I tried hard enough. I didn't know softness could be mistaken. For weakness, I wore my heart openly every day. That was my first mistake. Back then, my fiancé loved that softness at first, or at least I thought he did. He said I made life feel warmer, lighter, safer. He promised forever without hesitation. He was my best friend before he was my future. We planned everything together, or so I believed. I trusted him completely. That trust became my blindfold. I never removed it now. My best friend was always beside me, sharing secrets, laughter, and late night dreams. I trusted her like a sister. She knew every fear I had. She held my hand during panic attacks. I never imagined she could hurt me. Why would I? We were inseparable, or so I thought. That belief protected nothing. It only delayed pain forever silently. In my mind, love was the answer to everything broken. If problems came, we would talk. If people interfered, we would stand strong. I believed. Loyalty was automatic. I believed family wanted my happiness. I believed intentions mattered more than actions. I was wrong about all of it. I just didn't know yet. Reality was approaching quietly fast that night. My mother seemed supportive when I introduced my fiancé proudly. She smiled, hugged him, praised his manners. She said she trusted my choice. Her approval felt comforting. I didn't notice how closely she watched him, how carefully she listened. Her questions were soft but strategic. I mistook control for care. I was grateful, not cautious ever at that moment. Then, slowly, small things began to feel different between us. My fiancé started seeking her advice. He repeated her words, not mine. My best friend grew quieter around me. She avoided my eyes. Sometimes I blamed stress, nothing else. Love teaches you to explain away warnings. I ignored every signal. Because trust felt safer than doubt always back then for me, I was busy planning a future while mine was being rearranged. I talked about wedding colors and houses. My best friend nodded silently. My mother offered suggestions eagerly. Everything looked normal on the surface. Underneath, lines were shifting. I felt it, but I didn't question it. I was afraid of looking insecure, so I stayed quiet that entire time blindly. The night it happened, the house was unusually quiet. Lights dim, voices low, tension thick. I walked toward the kitchen for water. That's when I heard muffled sobbing. It stopped me cold. I recognized her voice immediately, my best friend. She was crying. My mother whispered comfortingly. I stood, frozen, unseen. My heart began breaking silently right there alone inside. I leaned closer without breathing. My mother's words were soft but firm. She deserves stability, she said quietly. You need someone stronger. My best friend sobbed harder. I felt my chest collapse inward. I understood nothing fully, yet everything enough. This wasn't comfort, it was persuasion. My world tilted violently. I wanted to scream. But my body refused completely then. I stepped back into the darkness, unseen and unheard. My hands shook as I realized the truth forming. Love wasn't leaving loudly, it was being negotiated quietly. I walked to my room numb. That night I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for morning. Something had shifted forever, and I wasn't ready for what came next at all. Chapter 2. When trust began to slip, 600 words, I didn't confront anyone the next morning. I smiled, nodded, and pretended nothing had changed. That was my survival instinct kicking in. When truth hurts too much, you wrap it in silence. Inside, though, something fragile had cracked. I could feel it with every breath. I had heard enough to know I wasn't imagining things anymore. At breakfast, my best friend wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her cup. My mother acted normal, overly normal. She asked me about my plans, my work, my day. My fiancé was quieter than usual, checking his phone more often. The room felt staged, like everyone had memorized lines except me. I kept replaying the whispers in my head. She deserves stability. You need someone stronger. Those words sat heavy in my chest. Were they talking about me like I was a weakness, like something temporary? I had given love without limits. I had trusted without conditions. Now I felt like an option being evaluated. Later that day, my fiancé pulled away. When I reached for his hand, it was subtle, but I noticed. I always noticed. "You okay?" I asked softly. "Just tired," he said too quickly. That was the first lie I caught. It wouldn't be the last. My best friend stopped calling. Messages went unanswered for hours, then days. When she finally replied, her words felt distant, careful. "I'm just dealing with some stuff," she texted. I stared at the screen, wondering when we stopped being her safe place. Wondering when I stopped being enough. My mother began offering advice I never asked for, about relationships, about maturity, about compromise. "Love isn't everything," she said one evening, stirring tea slowly. "It should be," I replied. She smiled politely, like you smile at a child who doesn't understand the world yet. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was too emotional, too trusting, too soft. Maybe stability meant something I couldn't provide. That thought terrified me. I had built my identity around love. If love wasn't enough, then what was I? One evening, I overheard my fiancé on the phone. His voice was low, careful. "I'm trying to do the right thing," he said. I stood behind the door, heart racing. "I just need time." Time for what? For who? When I entered the room, he jumped slightly, forced a smile, asked about my day. I answered automatically, my mind elsewhere. I was starting to feel like a guest in my own relationship, like decisions were being made in rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, not loud sobs. Quiet ones, the kind you don't want anyone to hear. I cried for the girl who believed love fixed everything. I cried because trust was slipping through my fingers and I didn't know how to hold it tighter without breaking myself. The distance grew daily, conversations became shorter, touch became rare, laughter disappeared. My best friend avoided me. Completely now. My mother spoke about me more than to me. I felt watched, judged, replaced in slow motion. One afternoon, my fiancé finally said the words that confirmed my fear. "We need to talk," he said, eyes fixed on the floor. My heart dropped instantly. Those words never bring good news. I nodded, forcing calm. "Okay," I whispered. He hesitated, then spoke. "I'm confused. About us. About the future. Confused." That word shattered what little hope I had left. Confused meant influenced. Confused meant someone else had been whispering louder than me. As he spoke, I realized something painful. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about loyalty, about boundaries, about betrayal that didn't scream but slowly suffocated. I listened quietly, knowing deep down this conversation wasn't the beginning of honesty. It was the beginning of goodbye. There was no argument, no warning, just a sudden stillness between us that felt heavier than any fight. He sat across from me that evening, hands folded, eyes lowered like someone waiting for permission to leave a room he had already decided to walk out of. "I've been thinking," he said. Those 3 words made my chest tighten. Because when people start thinking alone, they usually stop choosing together. I waited for him to say it was stress, or fear, or something we could fix with time and honesty. Instead, he spoke carefully, like he was negotiating terms instead of ending a relationship. "I don't think this is working anymore." Working, as if love was a machine that had failed inspection. I asked him what changed. I asked him when. I asked him why he didn't talk to me first. Each question landed softly, like I was afraid of scaring the truth away. He avoided my eyes. "I need someone more stable," he finally said. That word again, stable. I had heard it before, in my mother's voice, in her long pauses, in the way she compared me to my best friend without ever using my name. Suddenly, everything aligned. I asked him directly, "Is this about her?" The silence that followed was loud enough to end everything. "I didn't plan it," he said. Quickly, "She understands me." he added, slower, understands, as if love is a competition and empathy has a finish line. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't rise. I surprised even myself with how calm I sounded when I said, "When were you going to tell me?" He hesitated. That hesitation felt like betrayal learning how to breathe. "I didn't want to hurt you." That's when I almost laughed. Because the people who say that are usually standing on the sharpest part of the knife. From the hallway, my mother appeared. Not shocked. Not confused, ready. "She be happier with you," she said to him gently, as if she was blessing. A decision already finalized. "You deserve peace." Peace. At my cost, I looked at her, waiting for denial. Waiting for defense? Waiting for my mother to choose me? She didn't. Instead, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "You'll understand one day." That sentence broke something permanent inside me. I realized then this wasn't a choice I lost. This was a choice I was never invited to. My best friend stopped answering my calls after that night. She avoided. Shared spaces avoided my eyes. Guilt looks like distance when it's too heavy to carry openly. I packed my things quietly. Each folded shirt felt like a goodbye to a version of myself that believed loyalty was automatic. I didn't cry until I was alone. And when I did, it wasn't loud. It was the kind of crying that feels embarrassed to exist. As I left the house, my mother said, "You're strong." "You'll move on?" I didn't answer. Because strength shouldn't be a requirement for surviving your own family. Outside, the air felt different, colder, sharper, honest. I walked away without screaming, without closure, without revenge. But something inside me hardened that night. Something stopped hoping, stopped trusting easily, stopped begging for places. Where I was no longer wanted, I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I wasn't going back. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a message I never expected to receive. An invitation, their engagement announcement. And that's when I realized my silence was about to become very visible. Mini cliffhanger. I stared at the screen, heart racing, wondering how much pain a person is expected to. Their happiness was announced like my pain didn't exist. The invitation sat on my phone for a long time before I opened it. Gold borders, smiling emojis. Words like celebration and new beginnings. My name wasn't there, but my absence was expected. To be graceful, I stared at the screen, wondering how people celebrate love built on someone else's silence. I didn't reply. Not yes, not no. Silence felt safer than pretending I was okay. Silence was the only thing no one could argue with. Few days later, relatives started calling. Not to ask how I was, but to tell me how happy everyone was. How perfect they looked together. How destiny works in mysterious ways. "Be strong," one aunt said softly. "You're mature, you'll understand," another added. Understand what? That love can be reassigned like property? I stayed home on the day of the engagement, curtains closed. Phone off. I tried to distract myself with chores, but every corner of the room felt too quiet. Even the walls knew something had ended. I imagined them standing together. My best friend wearing the smile she used to practice in my mirror. Him holding her hand the way he once held mine. My mother standing proudly between them like a bridge she had successfully built. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because something in me had gone numb. Pain changes shape when it stays too. Later that evening, my mother came into my room. She sat on the edge of my bed like nothing had happened. Like this was just another conversation about weather or groceries. "You didn't come?" she said. I looked at her and waited. Maybe this was where she would apologize or explain. Or say she was wrong. Instead she said, "People noticed." A sentence told me everything. "I didn't raise you to be bitter," she added. I didn't respond because bitterness is loud. And I was quiet. The wedding date came faster than I expected. Too fast, as if they were afraid time might bring doubt. Invitations were sent, photos were shared, smiles multiplied, and somehow I was expected to attend. "You should be there," my mother insisted. "It's family." Family, the word felt unfamiliar now. On the wedding day, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Not choosing a dress, but choosing a version of myself that could survive the room. I wore something simple, something that didn't invite attention or questions. At the venue, Everything looked perfect. Flowers, lights, music, love packaged beautifully. When I walked in, conversations paused for half a second, then resumed. Pity hides well behind politeness. He saw me. Our eyes met. Just for a moment, he walked over, nervous, unsure. I didn't expect you to come, he said. I didn't expect this either, I replied calmly. He swallowed. I hope you're okay, I smiled. Not because I was, but because I refused to bleed in public. My best friend didn't come near me. She avoided my direction like I carried something contagious. Guilt has a way of making people look away. During the ceremony, I watched them exchange vows that sounded painfully familiar. Promises I had heard before. Promises I once believed were meant for me. No one noticed when I quietly stepped outside. The night air was cold, honest. I breathed deeply for the first time in weeks. That's when I understood something important. I wasn't losing love. I was being released from a place where I was never truly chosen. I left before the reception ended. No goodbye, no drama. Just silence again, but this time it wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of distance. I arrived with one suitcase and a heart that didn't trust happiness anymore. The city didn't welcome me. It didn't need to. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for distance. Distance from memories, from faces that knew my pain too well, from a past that kept trying to define me. I rented a small room with cracked walls and a window that barely opened. It wasn't home, but it was quiet. Quiet enough to hear myself think again. The first few weeks were the hardest. I woke up disoriented, forgetting where I was. Sometimes I reached for my phone, ready to text someone who no longer existed in my life. Then reality settled in, heavy and undeniable. I cried alone. I healed alone. Slowly. I learned how to breathe without permission. I found a job that didn't care about my story. No one asked who broke me or why I flinched when people raised their voices. I was just another name on the schedule, another employee trying to survive. That anonymity saved me. Work gave structure to my days. Routine replaced chaos. I learned to focus on tasks instead of thoughts, on deadlines instead of memories. Every completed shift felt like a small victory. In the evenings, I walked the streets with headphones on, pretending the music could drown out the questions in my head. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. Healing isn't linear. It never is. There were nights I blamed myself for trusting too much, for loving too deeply, for not seeing the signs sooner. Self-blame is seductive. It gives pain a reason. But eventually, I realized something important. Being kind wasn't my flaw. It was just given to the wrong people. I started doing things for myself without explaining them to anyone. I changed my hairstyle. I rearranged my habits. I learned how to enjoy coffee alone, how to sit with my thoughts without panicking. I stopped waiting for apologies that were never coming. The silence that once scared me began to feel peaceful. No arguments, no comparisons, no expectations to shrink myself so others could feel bigger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing a role. I wasn't the emotional one, the understanding one, the sacrificial one. I was just me. On weekends, I explored the city slowly. Libraries, small cafes, parks where strangers smiled and kept walking. No one knew who I used to be, and that freedom felt intoxicating. I began journaling again, not about heartbreak, but about growth, about the woman I was becoming, about the strength I didn't know I had until survival demanded it. Some days were still heavy. Grief doesn't disappear, it changes form. But now, it didn't control me. I controlled how much space I gave it. I learned to set boundaries without guilt, to say no without over-explaining, to walk away without apologizing for choosing myself. And something surprising happened. I started to feel proud of the way I didn't beg anyone to stay, proud of the way I rebuilt without revenge, proud of the woman who chose dignity over desperation. I wasn't healed completely, but I was healing honestly. One evening, as I stood by my window watching city lights flicker on, I realized I hadn't thought about them all day. Not my mother, not my best friend, not the man who replaced me without hesitation. That realization didn't hurt. It felt like progress. I understood then that starting over doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes it's just choosing to wake up and keep going when no one is watching. I didn't come to this city to prove anything to anyone. I came here to find myself, and slowly, piece by piece, I was doing. Success has a sound, it's quiet, but it echoes long after the applause dies. Tonight, I wanted them to hear it that after years of building myself, clawing through moments that should have broken me, I hosted a formal party, business, celebration, closure, a statement I was finally done hiding. I invited everyone who mattered, or thought they mattered, my mother, my sister, my ex, his wife. Each of them carried assumptions like luggage, unaware that I had packed a whole new life in mine. They came, curious, confident, unaware that the room smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume. Crystal glasses clinked, the soft hum of conversation weaving through the chandeliers. I watched them from the corner, feeling a thrill of control I hadn't known I craved. Mystery had always been my weapon, and tonight I wielded it well. My sister smiled politely when she saw me. Too polite, too practiced. I knew that smile. It was the one she reserved for people she intended to compete with. I allowed a small, private smirk in return. My mother scanned the room like a general assessing the battlefield. Old habits die hard. She lingered on me a beat too long, as if trying to measure whether I was still the same little girl who needed her permission to breathe. Then my ex walked in with his wife. They were flawless. Well-dressed, perfectly composed, holding hands with that smug, entitled confidence only a person who thinks they've won could have. I sipped my drink, letting the silence stretch. Let them feel the weight of my absence in their lives. Let them wonder what they'd missed. No one knew who my husband was. I liked that. Mystery felt like control, and power tasted sweeter when it was quiet. The clock ticked past 8. Guests mingled, laughed, and judged. I moved through them like a ghost of my former self untouchable, observing, noting every flicker of surprise and curiosity in their eyes. Then he arrived. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. The moment he entered, the air shifted. Conversation stuttered, glasses paused mid-air, heads turned. I saw recognition flash across a few faces, but not all. That was intentional. He wore a simple black suit, no jewelry. No show, but the way he carried himself, the calm certainty, was enough. The room responded before words could. And when his eyes met mine, I felt it. The quiet thrill of being completely seen. My mother's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion she couldn't hide. My sister's polite smile faltered. My ex's jaw tightened just enough that his teeth showed. And his wife? She looked confused, the kind of confusion that comes from realizing you've underestimated someone. I leaned back against the polished oak of the bar, letting the moment sink in. I had created this scene, this tension, every detail carefully curated. And yet, even as I basked in it, a whisper of fear grazed my spine. Power is intoxicating, but it's also unpredictable. A waiter passed by with champagne. I took the glass, held it, and let my gaze wander over the crowd. They were all here, under my roof, thinking they understood me, thinking they knew my story. But the truth was mine alone. Who is he? My sister finally whispered, stepping close, her voice low, sharp. I smiled, slow, deliberate. He's someone you'll have to figure out for yourself. The words hung in the air, delicious and dangerous. She blinked, trying to mask her irritation, but I saw at her need to unravel the mystery. I allowed myself a small, private laugh. Let them unravel. That was part of the game. The evening moved on, but every conversation, every laugh, every glass raised felt filtered through the presence of him. He didn't dominate, he didn't need to. His quiet confidence reshaped the room, bending it subtly to a new order. My order. I caught my ex staring at us from across the room. There was disbelief in his eyes, a spark of regret. That particular regret that comes only when someone realizes what they lost too late. I didn't gloat, not aloud. I let the silence do the work. My husband moved closer, placing a hand gently on my back, a touch that said everything without words. I felt a shiver, not from fear, but from recognition, from understanding that some power cannot be claimed alone. It's shared, intimate, unspoken. The night stretched on, glittering chandeliers and soft music masking the tension. Every guest danced, talked, judged, but I moved through it differently. I was no longer the girl who hesitated, who compromised, who stayed quiet. I was the architect of this moment, and yet, even as I felt victorious, I noticed the shift in my own chest, a subtle reminder that power is never permanent. Someone always notices the cracks. Someone always tests the boundaries. The last note of music drifted as the lights dimmed slightly. I felt his hand tighten just enough to remind me, tonight was not the end. It was the beginning of a new game, and then I saw her. My ex's wife, stepping closer to me, her eyes narrowed. She had a question on her lips, one I knew would cut deeper than any glass or whisper. I held my breath. Who exactly are you? I smiled, calm, controlled, but inside I felt the tiniest tremor. Some invitations, I realized, change everything. And some answers will cost more than you're ready to pay. Samiana's strongest revenge isn't yelling. It isn't humiliation, it isn't public exposure, it's silence. It's walking away, unshaken, untouchable, unbreakable. The room was quiet when he introduced himself. Not flashy, not arrogant, just calm, confident. My husband's presence carried a weight that shifted the atmosphere in an instant. It wasn't about rescue, it wasn't about saving me. It was about partnership, about equality. About standing beside me, not in front, not behind. My name is, he said, and even as he spoke, I felt the room adjust around him. Respect radiated from every word, influence, authority, that subtle power they once thought I'd never attain now walked in with me. My mother's face froze mid-expression, as if her brain couldn't reconcile the girl she thought she molded with the woman standing in front of her. My sister opened her mouth, closed it, tried again, and failed to form a word. My ex, he couldn't even breathe properly. Like the very air had shifted in a way he wasn't prepared for. He didn't need to fight them. He didn't need to attack. He didn't need drama. Instead, he simply thanked my mother. His voice calm, steady, carrying the weight of a truth she couldn't argue with, for teaching her what she deserves by showing her what she doesn't. No insults, no venom, no theatrical flair, just truth, quiet and devastating. It was the kind of truth that sinks into the soul, that makes people stare at you and realize the rules they thought applied no longer do. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. Every glance, every reaction from them was enough. The room was full of people who thought they had power over me, and for the first time, I realized I had already stripped it away simply by surviving, simply by existing, simply by becoming more than they ever expected. I held my husband's hand, warm, solid, a reminder that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and steady and immovable. We walked away together not because I wanted to prove I had one, but because I no longer needed validation from people who had lost access to me years ago. The night outside glittered with city lights, a reminder that the world is enormous and opportunities endless. I felt light, not triumphant, not vengeful, but free. Completely and irrevocably free. I reflected on the past, the betrayals, the doubts, the endless nights wondering if I was enough. And now, standing in that quiet power, I understood something clearly. They didn't lose me when they betrayed me. They lost me when I survived it. There is a subtle beauty in survival. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand applause. But it carries a quiet authority. People may try to diminish you, underestimate you, manipulate you, but nothing pierces the armor you build from your own resilience. As we stepped into the car, the weight of the evening slowly melted away. My husband looked at me, his gaze steady. Unafraid, I realized that, for the first time, I wasn't defining myself by their expectations. I wasn't measuring my worth against their opinions. I wasn't tethered to old shadows. I was fully, undeniably mine. He squeezed my hand. "You're incredible," he said. No fanfare, no exaggeration. Just truth, and in that moment I realized being unbreakable doesn't require a battle. It doesn't require proving anything to anyone. It only requires knowing your own strength and refusing to allow anyone to diminish it. I remembered the nights I cried alone, feeling small and powerless. I remembered the moments when I doubted myself, when the world seemed determined to remind me of my weaknesses, and yet, here the first was stronger, clearer, calmer, free. That night, I allowed myself a rare vulnerability. I let a small smile escape, genuine, unforced. I whispered to him, more to myself than anyone else, "I'm done running." And he smiled back, not with pity, not with arrogance, but with understanding. That quiet acknowledgement reinforced everything. I had learned strength shared is strength multiplied, and no one can break what you refuse to surrender. The days ahead would not be easy. People would continue to underestimate me. People would continue to doubt what I had built, but it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't looking for their approval. I wasn't waiting for their recognition. I was living, moving, breathing in a world that I had claimed as mine, unapologetic ally. And sometimes the most exquisite revenge is precisely that. Living well, living fully, thriving in ways they never imagined, and never again allowing anyone the privilege of control over your spirit. I thought of my ex, of my mother, of my sister, not with hatred, not with regret, but with clarity. They are not villains, they are reminders of the lessons I had to learn, of the strength I had to cultivate, and of the power that now resided in me. That night I understood something else too. Real power isn't visible to everyone. It's subtle, quiet, relentless. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. And when it's combined with survival, resilience, and self-respect, it becomes unshakable. As I closed my journal later that night, I wrote one final line. Sometimes the strongest revenge is becoming unbreakable, and I knew, without a doubt, that I had arrived.